What's up YouTube? KS Gun Guy here. Thanks for joining me as always. If you like what you see here, do be sure to like, subscribe, and share. There's plenty more content on the way. So I sort of debated about doing this video or not, partly because I think we're going to start getting pretty tired of the CZ P-10C. I'm going to get that way too. However, I've had a conversation or a couple of conversations with my buddies 1776 or Bust, Honest Outlaw Reviews, and Spec Op 4. Links to all those channels below. And we've been talking a little bit about the P-10, what we like, and some of the things we're starting to notice. So I thought it'd be a good time to not only do a little bit of an update video, but also do another if I could only have one, I guess we'll call it a challenger video. And of course, this is just merely opinion and this is for fun. At the end of the day, I like both of these guns quite a bit. I don't think you can go wrong with either one. However, the design of this is to, at the end, have a winner. And we'll take a look just a little bit at specs and features and value, a little bit of shooting. We'll talk about the trigger a little bit. And at the end of the video, I will announce a winner. Now, this won't be a deep dive on either one of these firearms. If you want a deep dive on those, be sure to check out my other videos on each one. They are out there and links are below. So let's go ahead and get started with this. I imagine this won't be a terribly long video because we've talked a lot about both of these firearms. But again, both are unloaded and will remain so throughout the video. All right, from a spec standpoint, I'll give you a couple of different views here. For the most part, these guns are relatively similar. Now, the P-10C does come in just a little bit bigger in most regards in terms of your height and your width. The length is almost identical, but where we talk a little bit of difference, and Glocks are notoriously light, this one remains so. The weight on the Glock is 23.65 ounces versus the weight on the CZ at 26 ounces. So depending on how you look at it, some people say a little bit heavier gun might be a little bit easier to shoot and absorb a little bit more recoil, whereas some people might say a slightly lighter gun or more petite gun might be a little bit easier to carry. So your mileage may vary there. I don't think we can determine a winner based upon that, but that's our biggest difference in terms of our stats. So really, where we start to talk about some differences are going to be the features. So the CZ P-10C has a couple of different things going on that I really like and a couple of things that perhaps I don't like very much, and some of my buddies that I mentioned before have started to notice. So from a grip standpoint, the grip is, I would say, kind of a medium aggressive grip. Some people might say it's a little bit more aggressive than that, but for me it works reasonably well. On the front and the back straps, there are little pyramids that are reminiscent of perhaps a Glock Gen 4. I've noted that before, but maybe a little bit more pronounced. So some people would say as you're shooting, and depending on how hard you grip with your shooting hand, you might walk away with a little bit of an imprint. Not sure if you can see that very well, but they are there. And then on these sides, there are going to be little squares that are a little bit more subdued. Once again, I think it's fantastic. I don't grip the gun very, very hard with my shooting hand. I try to support it more with my, in this case, left hand. So the texture does continue up on the frame on both sides. So you have a reference point for maybe your index finger or a support thumb if you decide to use it that way or shoot with that particular method. I think that's really nice. I think that's a good add-on for the gun. You do also have an accessory rail for lights, lasers, grenade launchers. Now, in terms of the magazine release, here's something that I've noticed with my buddies. The magazine release, of course, is ambidextrous, and that can be a great thing for left-handed shooters. However, we've all noted that the magazine release is pretty stout. It's starting to lighten up maybe just a little bit with use, which is good, but it still takes pretty good effort to make that work. Hopefully that will continue to lighten up. Now, one thing that 1776 or Bust brought to my attention, thank you for that, is when you load a magazine fully to capacity at 15 rounds and put one in the chamber, if you try and eject the magazine, it can be quite difficult to do so. So I'll be curious to hear what you guys think if you've got this firearm and you play around with that. Use dummy rounds, of course, unless you're at the range and want to give it a try. But then the one other thing about the grip, it does have a little bit of a well, so you can grab that magazine if for some reason you have a malfunction, which is a nice addition. It's pretty subtle, but it definitely is there. Now, from a slide lock, slide release standpoint, once again, it is ambidextrous. So again, for you lefties, that's really nice to have. Now, we've also noticed that, and I'll wheel in a little bit of footage here, I have had so far one hang up with this, and it took me a little bit by surprise. I was able to actuate it, but it took a fair amount of muscle to get that done. Now, that's the only time it's done that, and I've used it several times in shooting, but I did notice that. And I think that part of that is the design, the fact that the bar goes all the way across on the inside of the frame, so it's not a dedicated one-side slide release. From a slide perspective, speaking of that, you do have front and back slide serrations, which is great. And I've noted in previous videos that the slide serrations are pretty aggressive. They're really nice and certainly very functional on the firearm. So the Glock, several things going on here. Now this is the Vickers Lipsy's new release, whatever you want to call it. So this is built on the Gen 3 frame. However, they've done this RTF texture on it, and I equate these to kind of like little pin heads on here, and they're reasonably sharp. However, when you grip the gun, it actually, in my opinion at least, is quite comfortable and really gives a really nice purchase on the firearm. I also really like Gen 4 firearm grips as well. I'm not very fond of the standard Gen 3 Glocks. I think those are a little bit slick. Now you do have finger grooves on the Glock, and you really don't on the CZ. Some people really like the finger grooves. Some people actually take the time to shave them off, so your mileage may vary there. They don't really bother me very much, but the one thing that I would prefer is a little bit more of an undercut, which the CZ has. So that might be something that I do to this at some point in time. It's a minor criticism, and I've gotten used to shooting Glocks over the years, so it's not that big of a deal. But just a little bit higher up on the under part of the trigger would be, or trigger guard rather, would be really nice on that. Now, you don't have any sort of indention to grab onto magazines. However, for this particular model, the magazine plates for the Vickers do have little ledges on them on both sides, so you can grab that magazine and pull it out. It also does come with a grip plug that actually contains a tool in it. Gerald Weldon pointed that out to me. Appreciate you, Gerald. Link to his channel below. Be sure to go subscribe to him as well as the other guys down there. But that's kind of a nice add-on. It does have a little punch that's attached to it. Now, of course, again, you do have your accessory rail for lights, lasers, grenade launchers, that sort of thing. So not really a give or take with either gun there. In terms of the magazine release, once again, this is built on the Gen 3 frame, so it's going to have a Gen 3 magazine release, and it works just fine, although it's pretty small, and you depending on how big your hand is, you might have to reach a little bit more for it, versus the Gen 4, which is a bigger magazine release, and I do prefer that. However, you can get extended magazine releases for this, so you can definitely remedy that if you want to. From a slide release or slide lock standpoint, this is not ambidextrous. It's just on the left side. However, it functions very well as either a slide lock or slide release. I don't release these without a round going into the chamber, so I won't do that on camera, but I will tell you that this works just fine and not a problem at all. But once again, not ambidextrous. From a slide standpoint, you do have slide serrations on the back, and the slide serrations are great. However, you don't have them on the front. But I've noted in my original video that the finish on this particular gun, and generally speaking with Gen 4s, you can still get a pretty good grip as long as your fingers aren't too wet or oily or anything like that. It still works just fine. Now there are some new Glocks on the way that do have forward serrations on them, so you don't have to go have them milled out yourself. So that's kind of cool, but again, the finish is just fine on this. Excuse me. So from a sight perspective, I'll give a little bit of a lineup here and see how well I can do this on camera. And of course, I will do each one on their own. But from a sight perspective on the CZ, it does come with steel sights, and they are a Novak style on your rear sight with just enough of a ledge to go ahead and do one-handed manipulations on it. Now, these are the phosphorescent sights, or the glowy sights, I like to call them. So they do gather light, and they do glow for just a little while. You know, that's fine, and at the range, I think it's great. They're easy to pick up. However, from a carry standpoint, I don't think they do a lot of good. So I would still say some night sights or high-vis sights would be really nice for this. Hopefully those are forthcoming. Perhaps there's some out there now, but maybe there will be more options down the road. Now, Glocks have a variety of different sight options, and generally speaking, and I think we all know the standard Glock U-notch, and I'll wheel in a picture of that. But this particular one, the Vickers Tactical or Ellipses, whatever you want to call it, does come with some upgraded sights, which is really nice. That front sight is an Ameriglow Pro iDot front sight, and then a Wilson Combat U-notch rear sight, and it is blacked out on the back. And I just, when I picked up this gun, I just fell in love with this particular sight picture. I think it's absolutely fantastic. It's really easy to pick up day or night, at least that front sight. Of course, you don't have any sort of tritium vials on the back, but you do in the front. So I really like the sights on this, but that kind of leads us a little bit to value. So the Glock, and Glocks definitely range in value depending on whether you pick up a Gen 3, a Gen 4, or perhaps a model like this Vickers model. So you're going to be looking at spending anywhere from, and I'm ballparking here, but anywhere from $450 all the way up to $650, or perhaps a little bit more, a little bit less, depending on where you look. And the only nice thing about spending a little bit more, at least for a model perhaps like this or some of the other special models, you do get upgraded sights. And I've always said switching out those polymer field goal sights that come with standard Glocks is something you probably ought to change out. And so building that into what you're spending is certainly something to consider. Whereas the CZ-P-10C again comes with steel sights, and they are certainly functional. So out of the box, you at least get some really good sights. However, again, not night sights, fiber optic, high vis, whatever you want to call it. So neither one is necessarily a winner or loser, although I have to give the nod a little bit to the Glock simply because of the aftermarket support and the different sight options that you can get for it. So let's go ahead and take a look at a little bit of shooting at the range and see how these guys do. All right, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that footage at the range. So, at the end of the day, both of these guns are very good shooters. There is one thing that I've noted before on the CZ P-10C, and I will note it again, that the geometry of the back of the grip here, just underneath the slide, for whatever reason, just kind of beats me up a little bit on my, I guess you could say, my thumb knuckle. It's not too bad. It's certainly tolerable, but it is something that I've noticed. Whereas on the Glock, it just sits very nicely. I guess the curve is just a little bit more aggressive there, and it's just a little bit more smooth. However, the undercut on the CZ is just a little bit nicer than the undercut on the Glock. So both have their pluses and minuses. But again, both very good shooters. In terms of the triggers, and I won't spend very much time on this, this has kind of been beaten to death here a little bit. But both guns have very good triggers, and these two particular guns are both measuring in right around the 5-pound mark if you average it out. So you've got your uptake on the CZ, and it's very smooth, just a little bit of resistance there. It's got a pretty good spring in it. But once you get to that wall, you do have a break. It's a very nice break. And then you've got your reset, and it's a nice audible reset. So it's a very nice trigger. It's very smooth. It's easy to predict, and it's very nice. And I like the fact that it's a little bit flat-faced in the trigger housing as well. So it's a very nice trigger overall. From a Glock standpoint, and this is a stock Glock trigger, no trickery just yet. That's coming, I'm sure, at some point in time. However, with a Glock, you can pretty well expect a little bit of resistance in the uptake, but the uptake is relatively short, which is kind of nice. But then you get to a very defined wall, and there's your break. Now, there is a little bit more travel in that break than there is with the CZ. In terms of the reset, the reset's out about 2 millimeters or so. It's not quite as tight and short as the CZ. However, it's a very nice tactile, audible reset. So one more time, there's your uptake and your wall. There's your break. Again, a little bit more distance there, right up against the back of the trigger guard. And then we've got our reset, and then we're back out to start. So again, both very good triggers, both very manageable, and I would say that they are pretty much on par with each other. Now, one thing, as you know, Glocks have an incredible aftermarket support, and so you can spend a lot of time messing around with triggers and connectors and springs and all sorts of things to customize it the way you want. Whereas CZ right now does not have the aftermarket support. However, I'm sure that will be forthcoming at some point in time. So, as I said when I started out with this is an if I could only have one firearm. So, at the end of the day, both of these guns are very good, but I have to choose between them. The CZ P-10C out of the box, I really like quite a bit. I like the fit and finish on it. I like the grip. I like the aggressiveness of the grip and the trigger. The sights are steel out of the box, although not night sights, but very good. So, if I had to grab it out of the box, for the most part, I would choose the P-10C. However, and we're not done just yet, the Glock has worked flawlessly. I haven't had to stop because of a tight magazine release or a slide stop that does or doesn't work or anything like that. It just works right out of the box. Now it's a little bit more expensive, and getting some of the features like on this Vickers model with the upgraded sights and that sort of thing, you're paying a little bit more money. But I have to give credit where credit's due. The Glock has just worked flawlessly. There has not been any sort of a hang-up or anything like that. So if I could only choose one right now today, I would choose the Glock 19. Now, it's a close race. I like both of these guns, and like I say, out of the box, if it wasn't for a couple of small hang-ups, I probably would choose the P-10C, even though I love Glocks. But at the end of the day, I have to be honest with myself and all of you that that right now the Glock takes it. So if I could only have one, I would have the Glock 19. So I'm really excited to hear what you guys have to say about this, what your comments and thoughts are, whether you agree or disagree. Of course, this is all about generating some interesting conversations and that sort of thing, so I'm looking forward to that. Be sure to join us on Wednesday nights. Myself, Big Johnson Guns and Gear, and 1776 or Bust. We do chats every Wednesday, so looking forward to seeing you there. And otherwise, be sure to like, subscribe, and share, and I will see you next time. Thanks.